Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sterling Live. My name is Caitlin Brower. I'm Sterling's Director of PR and Social Media and your host of Sterling Live. We have a great episode lined up for you today to wrap up April. We've had a very busy April with Sterling Live, many episodes. So we are wrapping up the month of April today with our final episode of the month, and it is a really good one. So as you can see with me today, we have Luc van Dijk, Enterprise Sales Executive for Sterling. Back check. Luc has been here before, so he is back with us today. And today we are talking about background screening trends in Canada for 2024. So, Luc, thank you so much for joining me again on Sterling Live. Different topic this time, but you're back. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Luc van Dijk. As you said, the Enterprise Sales Executive for Canada. I've been with Sterling for just over 7 years at this point. Had a wide variety of different hats over the time. And the entire time I've basically focused on Canadian screening over the years and following industry trends and doing my best to keep everyone updated.
And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We are going to keep everyone updated with the trends that we're currently seeing in Canada. So I want to take a quick moment if you're watching live on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube right now. If you have any questions for Luc throughout the episode, please go ahead and pop them in the comment section across these three platforms, and I will get them over to him as I see fit throughout the episode. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we're going to talk about 2024, but let's circle back a little bit and do a quick recap of 2023. So, at a high level, can you share what background screening in Canada looked like last year?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2023 was a very busy year. A lot happened, and we really had to stay dynamic across the year. So we saw a trend that really started in the early 2020s, which was a focus on quantitative information over qualitative information, continued and really accelerated. So what this means is that we saw a lot of organizations just across the board, across all verticals, that were really talking to us and really focused on cutting out noise. So
Mhm.
we're very much trying to see like what is the essential information that we need, both the essential information that we need to gather to make sure we don't over collect, but also the essential information that we need to make a hiring decision. So a lot of organizations really want to have that conversation with us and really needed our help to navigate that kind of thought process because you can't just start swinging an axe around in these types of programs and expect the integrity of the program to hold. So that was something that we were very busy with. Similarly, we also saw new risk emerge across various industries with more coordinated professional attempts at infiltrating key organizations across industries, where they were attempting to effectively infiltrate it via false information, false credentials, and really we really found ourselves in a spot where organizations needed our help to
Mhm.
build new tools, programs, products, etc., to make sure that we're not being caught on the back foot. And lastly, what we saw towards the end of 2023, and it's really carrying through into 2024, was just a massive surge in international hiring in Canada.
Yeah.
It's been exceptionally exciting. I say this a little bit of personal bias, being an immigrant to Canada myself, but really, with Canada achieving these record levels of immigration, both in temporary and permanent workers, but even study permits with conditional employment allowances, we're witnessing a massive diversification of the labor market. And with that, a lot of our organizations are embracing it wholeheartedly. They're trying to see everything that they can do to employ these individuals, but there's a lot more to consider and a lot more to navigate when it comes to international screening. So we've been very focused on that. That's a trend that, yeah, like I said, we saw it start happening in the
Mhm.
second half of last year, but it's continuing straight into 2024.
So a lot happening last year that really positioned us to enter this year. And as we're now, a couple of months in, we're definitely seeing a lot going on. So how I want to position our conversation today is I kind of want to break it out by, services and products that Sterling offers and kind of, how organizations can be using them. Should they, how are they using them? Should be using them and things like that. So I want to break it out that way. We can start with rescreening. So for
Mhm.
our audience, can you provide an overview of what rescreening is?
For sure. It's always a fun question because I found over the years that rescreening has a very different meaning in the US compared to Canada and even Europe and whatnot. So when it comes to rescreening in Canada, it's effectively where an organization has evaluated a need, a risk effectively, to run certain checks on a cycle. So normally we see this annually or biannually among their existing employees to help ensure that their most important assets, the people remain safe and secure, as well as kind of meeting any kind of compliance or regulatory requirements that their industry might have. So it's a very common practice in specific industries such as sports or finance or transportation, where we effectively see that they do have a standard cycle they follow, where they have usually it's a bulk upload, but it could also just be just as they come in, depending on the kind of ATS or HRM they use, and it just effectively involves just rescreening it and making sure that everyone is still meeting the minimum requirements for the role.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it is important to, prop up that across, the UK, the US, Canada, it can have a different meaning there. So thank you for that definition. We actually have information and data from recent job seekers. So 82% of them that we surveyed told us that a safe workplace is critical when selecting a new organization to work for. With this data, kind of how can rescreening make this a reality for candidates that are, looking to apply for new jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my opinion, it's key.
Mhm.
Screening, the way it works in Canada is that effectively when you run a check, when you're screening anybody, it is a snapshot in time and space with most of the data services, like a criminal record check. So, you're verifying what the candidate's reality is in that exact moment in time, but you have no insight on what happens at any point after that. You don't know what happens the next day. You don't know what happens the next week, the next month, etc. And especially in these kind of situations where you're trying to make sure that people are meeting the minimum requirements and everyone is still effectively safe to be around, you do want to have effectively make sure that you've got a rescreening program built
Mhm.
in, because that's something, we hear from organizations all the time. It's something they do mention to candidates. And if they don't mention it as in, here's a stick, they mention it as a, here's a carrot. Like, here's a positive thing. Like, we're making sure
Mhm.
that everyone's still on the same page. We're making sure that everyone is still in a good space, meeting your requirements, and that you're working with a like-minded group of people. And all of this, when you start looking at people's performance, especially at work, it's important that you do keep up on that and you do kind of ensure that everybody is meeting those requirements. So, we often talk about how employees are the top asset that any organization has, but at the same time, they're also the top risk. Like, one
Mhm.
individual can have a very significant impact, positive and negative, to any kind of organization. So by establishing a rescreening program, you can effectively help ensure that, let's call it the professional image of the applicant, continues to match the reality of what you're seeing day to day, and that they're still operating within the risk profile that you've effectively designated for the role.
Yeah, it's a clear want and desire from those candidates and those job seekers out there to work for a safe organization. And, putting rescreening in place, these organizations can go back and say, well, yeah, this is what we're doing to give you that guarantee, to give you that factor that indeed we are a safe organization to work for.
Exactly.
Moving into social media searches. So I think it is, I don't want to call it a misconception, but it might be common for individuals to go out and do some searching, some looking on their own when it comes to social media and other online platforms. Why is it important to not do a social media search without a partner like Sterling?
Absolutely. This is a hot topic question, and we get
Yeah.
that a lot. Organizations asking us, like, can we do this? And
Yeah.
the reality is, don't. Like, absolutely
Yeah.
don't. There's a lot of key considerations when it comes to social media programs, including, whether there's a need or a risk that's been identified, because that's central to any program you run in Canada. You have to make sure that you've identified a need and a risk that
Mhm.
you need to cover, and whether you're able to actually operate on it compliantly, whether you're searching in the right places for the right topics. The list really goes on when you start exploring social media programs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people and entities out there that try to simplify it down to sound like a basic Google search that everyone should do. You can do it easily, but it really just couldn't be further from the truth. There's a lot to consider, even in how the data is processed and how it's stored,
Mhm.
because there's a lot in about that in Canadian governance when it comes to, when you're running a social media check, what can you actually do with it? How should the data be stored and all that kind of fun stuff. And on top of that, it's really important to evaluate the profile. You need to think about the red flags, but also green flags that you're searching for. Because when you're looking, when you're searching somebody's online presence, you're kind of identifying, what you're looking at. You're not just looking at negatives, you're looking at positives as well. And then the negatives even need to be taken in the right context, because you need to see,
Right.
what is it being commented on? Is it that they liked something, 20 years ago, from an artist that now turns out there's some concern around?
Right.
Is that something you can act on? Um, so that's something you really need to take a look at. And providers at Sterling, we're we're, in my opinion, uniquely set up to fulfill that, because not only do we have an entire team that's dedicated to kind of evaluate all this, to help you go through it, to go over the customization options, which is really what you got to be looking at, because every single position that you're thinking of running a social media search for,
Mhm.
you're looking for different, effectively a different type of person, and the profile needs to match that. So when you're starting to look at it and you're starting to go into all of that info, you come to the conclusion that there really is so much room for error if you try to
Yeah.
run this on your own, or if you're trying to, find a discount solution to it. The reality is that you're just setting yourself up
Mhm.
for failure on just every front. So a provider like Sterling, like I mentioned, we can help you from start to finish. We can help you with identifying the profile. We can help you with customizing the package. We can effectively help you with, setting the parameters on what we're searching for, and also to really understand what you're wanting to do with the results. Because it's one of the very few services where we've even heard some organizations say, hey, we're running this not as a way to disqualify candidates, we're running this in a way to help candidates clean up their social profile.
Yeah.
So that's all this stuff has to be discussed so we can
Mhm.
effectively set up a comprehensive program.
Yeah. Hey, listen, as a social media professional, I can get on board with that mindset of cleaning up our profiles and making sure we are showing up the way, you want the world to see you, including your workplace. But really good detailed response there, Luke. Just it's not as easy as a Google search. You need to know what you're looking for. You need to do it compliantly and everything like that. So a little bit more advanced than just typing something into the good old Google, which we all do. So, definitely, really, really good description there. Another hot topic, I know Sterling talks around this a lot, is enhanced police information checks, also known as EPIC. So, what is the value of these checks?
What a question. Yeah.
Yeah,
So EPIC it's something I discuss day to day. So
yeah,
there's a lot of misunderstandings about this product in the industry, and I've often found that a lot of it comes from people kind of overcomplicating it.
hmm,
Because the simple reality is, it is the best practice. Running the enhanced police information check really is the best practice, and should be, in just a general opinion in the industry, should be the standard solution that you go to when you're looking at criminal
hmm,
checks, if that's what you're looking to run. Like, not only does it screen the RCMP National Repository for all records on file, it will also screen that local police information, what we call LPI, for anything ongoing, any pending charges, any unconverted convictions, you name it. So when you compare it to a basic criminal record check, you can see that EPIC really covers a substantial gap, right? Earlier I talked about how effectively when you do a check on somebody, you're getting that snapshot in space and time.
hmm,
And when you're doing that for an initial candidate, you want to have all that information. Just because they currently don't have a record, that doesn't mean that they're currently not under investigation. And there's such an easy way to check that, right? To see if there's something currently going on. And there's oftentimes, there's concern for organizations. Well, if something does show up and it's still pending, can we act on it? And the answer is sometimes you can, depending on the position, depending on the risk profile. That's something that you need to consider, you need to evaluate, and that's something that we can effectively
yeah,
assist you with as an organization, especially in positions of trust or positions where individuals are going to be around vulnerable individuals or around sensitive information. The EPIC solution really should be the go-to solution. As otherwise, if you're going with basic CRC, as I said, there's just a lot of risk still left on the table, and there's still a lot that you're not really considering.
yeah. So you said, it should be the go-to, it should be standard best practice. Is there anything else that kind of stands out to where an organization, they're saying like, how do I know it's the right one for me? Is there any other guidance you can provide for an organization asking that question?
Absolutely. Have a chat with us.
Yeah.
Reach out. We're always more than happy to hop on a call. We have this, I'm very proud of the team that we have here in Canada. We have all these subject matter experts. We always have Chuck Walker, who's
Mhm.
very, you can look him up on our website. He's very involved in his past with the RCMP, and can easily sit down and talk for hours about the benefits of EPIC. And we can kind of look at as well the risk index that you've created. So that's
Yeah.
something that we're very big on in Canada. Whenever we engage with an organization, we want to make sure that we help them build what we call a risk index for every position, and we can kind of evaluate it, label it, level it. So we can say, entry level position might be a risk index level 1, where they're not going to have access to anything
Yeah.
considerable. And in a case like that, maybe if there's cost considerations or what have you, they might decide that a basic CRC is the way to go. But for the other ones, it might not be due to the additional risk. So this is something that really we always recommend, like have a conversation with us. We're more than happy to hop on a call. We can do it over email, however you want to do it. But when in doubt, realistically, end of the day, if you're not certain, you're on that line and you don't know where to go, my recommendation is always to lean towards the EPIC and do that.
Yeah. Great recommendation. So I don't think it would be a 2024 trends conversation if we didn't bring up artificial intelligence. I think people would be like, "What? What do you mean? Biggest trend we're seeing right now, the hottest topic of conversation." So we will be talking about that. So how, is or will AI enter into the overall HR space and then the background screening, a little bit more targeted within background screening?
Absolutely. I feel like this has been the question of the week every week since the start of this year.
Yep.
So it's a fun one. Um, so here at Sterling, we're actively exploring AI and its place in background screening within our principles of transparency, privacy, security, and compliance. And
Mhm.
realistically, that's not exclusive to us. A lot of organizations right now are trying to figure out how are we going to implement AI effectively, how is it going to work, and all that stuff. And in the industry as well, it's very clear that there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of anxiety. So, from conversations with organizations in Canada, of enterprise organizations, both prospects and clients, there's a strong mix of excitement and anxiety around it. We're
Mhm.
still in the early days of AI. The tools are not fully refined yet. And on top of that, there's still a lot of information in forms of like random AI horror stories that go
Right.
viral or that you see on LinkedIn or Facebook, the news. You get the idea. And all of that is really just accelerated by, at the end of the day, most HR teams are our end users, and their
Mhm.
primary work is with people. And the reality, the number one asset of any company. So they're effectively trying to figure out how they can implement an automation tool to either process or manage data while simultaneously fearing that it's a
Right.
process that should always stay within human hands. So there's a lot, a real big juxtaposition there where they're trying to figure out, like, yes, we do want to use this, but how can we use it in a way that it kind of accentuates the program versus creating more risk? So it's a very difficult balancing act, and everyone really is still trying to figure out what the fine line is where everyone wins and where it makes sense and where it actually adds value. So we've got a lot of ongoing conversations about it.
Mhm.
And ultimately, it can really just be summarized with we're actively exploring it,
Yeah.
TBD.
Yeah. No, so as Sterling continues to actively explore, we're having these conversations. The questions keep coming to know you and your team and other people within the organization as well. How are you seeing the trend evolve, over this year? Then kind of like with these conversations that we're having.
Absolutely. So, in my opinion, clarity will come. So, AI is, and I'm
Yeah.
sure will remain, to be a hot topic item for years to come. And the reality is, that it's just not going to go away. So, with exposure comes realization. With realization comes comfort. And with comfort, the anxiety drops and implementation rises. So, my expectation is that we're just going to see a lot of development. If I put on my Nostradamus hat for a moment, based on all the conversations I'm having with organizations, I personally think that we're about, I'd say, 3 years away from seeing wide implementation of AI in
Okay.
this space. And I'm saying that based just on my conversation with organizations and their reluctance and
Mhm.
hesitations, because there's still so much reluctance. I've had conversations with organizations who wanted us to confirm that we're not using AI
Right.
in specific processes or whether they can opt out of it. And that will fade. That's the reality. We saw this with
Mhm.
every type of technology that, an enhancement that came out. And but that does take time. And in this space, very few organizations really want to be a pioneer with this kind of technology out of fear of becoming the next scandal on
Yeah.
CBC or BBC or CNN, right?
Right.
Nobody wants that. So it'll keep being explored. I'm sure we'll start seeing, small scale implementations come a lot sooner than that. But before we start seeing mass implementation where it starts really impacting programs on scale, I think we're still quite a bit away of that. I'm expecting we're going to see a
Yeah.
lot more free radicals before we get there.
Yeah, I do very much appreciate, your initial response, so that clarity will come. I think that's a really good way to put it. And again, if it takes the 3 to 4 years, we'll see more adoption and we'll see that clarity. So I really thought that was a great response to that question. All right. So Last area that I'd like to cover, again, clearly a trends episode because it's another very much trending topic. It's been trending for Sterling for quite some time now. I want to talk about identity verification. So, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a significant surge in identity theft, in Canada. Can you walk us through how identity verification helps with this type of potential risk?
Yeah, absolutely. It's paramount,
Yeah.
especially with such a significant rise in remote work. Verifying a candidate's ID is a crucial first step when it comes to onboarding, as you simply must verify that the individual actually is who they say they are. So, in Canada, there's a regulatory requirement that help force this need, such as
Mhm.
needing to verify someone's identity before being able to run a criminal record check. But even beyond that, you've got to establish a basic system that establishes and confirms the answer to a very basic who are they?
Yeah.
Are they who they say they are? And here at Sterling, here in Canada, we operate with several methods of ID verification, ranging from knowledge-based authentication to multi-factor authentication, and even some other products to effectively counter or tackle that question. Um, and we've developed all of these tools to both help to cover the regulatory requirements, but also to help organizations confirm that they really are hiring the person they think they are.
Mhm.
Because if you're not doing that, the entire basis, the entire background check and onboarding process, in my opinion, becomes invalid. Identity is what roots the entire process in place. If you can't verify that the individual is who they say they are, then any other check after that is effectively moot because
Mhm.
you'll be verifying, the credentials of somebody who's not even sitting in front of you,
Right.
and that's the reality. So it's a very worded way to effectively
Mhm.
say that identity verification, it's key. It's the most
Yeah.
important part of the entire process to ensure that the process can work as intended. It is the big, like, effectively identity verification is the biggest deterrent to identity theft in this industry that we're seeing when individuals are applying for roles as someone else,
Mhm.
especially in a remote or first
Yeah.
world. So it's just a must-have.
Yeah. So, well, listen, so it's critical, it's a must have, it's key for organizations, but sometimes there are some scenarios where you can come across, individuals within specific communities where it might not be as easy to provide their identity. So, my question for you is how is Sterling helping, specific communities that may struggle with providing a verified identity?
Yes, absolutely. So this is something I'm actually very passionate about.
Yeah.
So to answer this accurately, about going on a thousand tangents and rants, I'll first identify
Right.
some key issues that different communities have had with
Mhm.
providing verified identity. So in the past, I've already spoken about Indigenous communities as well as LGBTQ plus communities, and
Mhm.
how specifically it can be a struggle for them to obtain valid forms of ID that properly represent them. And this issue hasn't gotten any better. It's still very much an issue in the Canadian reality, and arguably it's even getting more difficult in some provinces like
Mhm.
Alberta or New Brunswick or what have you. On top of all of that, you also have the new, well, never new, but now much larger pool, which is new immigrants. With new
Yeah.
immigration levels just skyrocketing, we've seen a surge of candidates that provide IDs from foreign countries. And with a lot of them being brand new to Canada, there's also no credit file for the TransUnion electronic ID verification tool to work with. So that's another big struggle. Like, how do you tackle that? And the way that we help these communities, ultimately, like all communities, ends up being the same way, which is that we offer every possible solution that we can, a diverse portfolio of identity verification tools that include everything from electronic ID verification, which can verify someone's ID without needing physical pieces of ID,
Yeah.
to sterling identity verification, which can even verify foreign pieces of primary ID. And continuing to also offer, Canada Post partnerships, as well as training, hiring managers on how to properly verify IDs as a backstop if necessary. So the answer is, as much as we'd like to think about it, there is no one-stop shop
Yeah.
solution that can cover every time, every candidate, every type of issue or every kind of gap. So we've done the next best thing, which is that we have and keep developing more methods of ID verification so that we can cover
Mhm.
as many candidates as possible. And we're always there to help them walk through the process, or even in some cases help them with like understanding the next steps of what they need to do to get the effectively meet the minimum requirements for us
Yeah.
to be able to complete their ID verification. So ultimately it's exceptionally tricky due to just the human element involved. All people are different, realities are different, and with that, what they have access to is different. And
Mhm.
when these requirements come up, so as I stated, our focus here at Sterling is to make sure we offer as many compliance solutions as we can, and make sure that we can help as many organizations as well as many candidates from all types of communities as much as possible in the process.
Yeah. It is great, and I know, you took a deeper dive into it on the last episode we were on together, so I do, if anyone out here is watching is more interested, I would definitely check out that episode. It was really, really powerful and just, again, a deeper dive into the process behind the scenes there. And I think it's great, Sterling's not only providing multiple options. What you said that I really liked was, it's providing that knowledge and that education as well behind it. So why do we have X, Y, and Z option? How do you fall into that? How does the organization fall into that? And, all of that. So really, really good there that, again, the options are there, but we're also helping people understand why they're there, how to use them, and things like that.
Yeah.
All right. So those were all of the questions I had for you. I want to remind our audience as we close out today's episode, if you have any final questions, please send them in on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube in the comments section. As we wait for any final questions to come in, Luke, I'd just love to get some final thoughts from you from today.
Yeah. So ultimately, we always say this year is unlike last year,
Right.
and things keep developing and whatnot, but it really couldn't be more true right now. Especially in Canada, we found that in 2023, a lot of organizations were really kind of holding back on expanding their programs and looking at what they want to do next, just because of kind of like financial concerns in the Canadian economy. And this year, that has completely flipped.
Mhm.
Organizations are expecting things to start getting better. They're expecting the Bank of Canada to start making rate cuts, as an example, and with that comes, an expectation of more investment. So we're seeing that a lot of organizations are prepping to scale. They're prepping to expand. They're expanding their hiring pools as well. That's a massive topic right now. And
Mhm.
with that, there's a lot of considerations. And this is not something you can rush. You can't just tack something on and call it
Yeah.
quits and high five and think you're done. So, ultimately, we're always here to have that conversation with any
Mhm.
organization, be it a prospect or an existing client, and to kind of help them through it and make sure that you're avoiding pitfalls. Because ultimately, it's always about the client, but at the same time, it's also about the candidate. And we got to make sure we do
Yep.
right by them, and we're there to help with that.
Absolutely. Yes, we keep saying on these episodes, reach out if you want to have a conversation. If you have questions, you can reach out to Luke. You can reach out to the corporate or the Backcheck LinkedIn page. There's an inbox there. You can always do that. You can always visit our websites. Please, please, please reach out again for more information to have conversations and all of the above. At this time, we have no further questions, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank our live audience, thank our audience who is tuned in on demand as well. We appreciate it. Again, I know we just wrapped up a busy, busy month of April, but we will be back in May with more episodes. And importantly, Luke, thank you so much for coming on this episode and joining me for another episode of Sterling Live.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and I will catch you on the next episode.